She kept calling. The phone rang and rang and rang, and no one picked up. It was the 4th of July. There was music somewhere in the background, fireworks being set up a few neighborhoods over, the kind of noise that fills a holiday evening and makes everything feel normal. But Christine Wansley was not feeling normal. Her son had not come home. Her son had not called, and every number she dialed either went to voicemail or connected her to someone who told her, politely, that this was not their jurisdiction, that she needed to try someone else, that they were not the right office. Her son was 18 years old. He had been on an island off the Mississippi coast, and somewhere between the afternoon sun and the evening fireworks, Nolan Wells had vanished, and no one could tell her who was responsible for finding him. That is where this story begins. Not with a press conference, not with a case number, with a mother on the phone, being passed from one agency to the next, on the night her entire world stopped making sense. Drop where you are watching from in the comments right now. I want to know. City, state, country, wherever you are. And if you have been following this case since the beginning, tell me what you think happened to Nolan Wells. Because today, we have new developments that change the shape of this investigation, and I need you locked in for every single second of this video. Let's go back to the beginning. The 4th of July weekend, Jackson County, Mississippi. A group of young people, Nolan among them, boarded a boat and made their way out to an island off the coast. It was the kind of plan that gets made 100 times every summer along that stretch of water. Pack a cooler, get on a boat, spend the holiday on the water with your friends. Ordinary. Completely ordinary. The kind of afternoon that nobody photographs with the intention of it meaning anything later. The kind of day that only becomes significant in hindsight, when investigators are asking people to close their eyes and remember exactly where they were standing, and exactly what was said, and exactly what time the sun was hitting the water. Nolan was 18. He had been born in 2006, which means this was the summer that marked the beginning of what everyone around him expected to be a long, full life. His mother had made dinner the night before, July the 3rd, a simple family meal, the kind of thing that happens in every household the evening before a holiday. Nolan was getting ready to spend the night with his friends before heading out the next day. Before he left, he told her he loved her, not in a ceremonial way, not in a way that felt like anything other than the ordinary, everyday kind of love that passes between a parent and a child on a Tuesday. He said it the way he always did. She said it back, and he walked out the door into an evening that neither of them knew was the last one they would share without grief attached to it. That detail matters. We will come back to it. Because in a case that is now tangled up in phone records, jurisdictional confusion, conflicting witness accounts, and federal coordination, that quiet July 3rd evening is the one thing that exists outside all of it. It is the memory that cannot be cross-examined. It is what Christine carries underneath everything else. But the next morning, July the 4th, Nolan got on that boat, and by the time the sun began to go down over Jackson County, he was gone. Here is what the investigation has established about his final hours on the island. At some point during the day, Nolan was seen in conversation with a young woman. A short conversation, the kind of exchange that happens 1,000 times on a beach on a holiday weekend. Two people talking, the water behind them, the noise of a celebration all around them. His friends were preparing to leave. The boat they had all arrived on was getting ready to depart. And according to the friends, Nolan made the choice to stay behind. That is the version they gave investigators. He decided not to get on the boat. He stayed, and they left. That is one version of those final minutes. There is another. For weeks, the identity of the young woman Nolan had been speaking with circulated online without confirmation. Her name was guessed at, debated in comment sections, speculated about in forums dedicated to tracking every development in the case. She became, in the absence of a name, a symbol of the central unanswered question: what happened in those last few minutes before Nolan was last seen? What did she know? What had they talked about? Why had no one heard from her directly? That silence ended this week, and the way it ended matters. Her family did not wait to be identified by someone else. They did not leak the information or let it spread through second-hand accounts. They chose to speak publicly, on their own terms, in their own words. Her name is Katie McCormack. She was 18 years old on the day she met Nolan Wells on that island. Her mother, Gracie McCormack, confirmed to the public that Katie was the young woman who had been with Nolan that afternoon. And through an account shared by Katie's sister, the details of their final conversation have now entered the public record for the first time. According to the family, Nolan's friends were urging him to wrap up the conversation. The group was ready to go. The boat was not going to wait indefinitely. Katie spoke with him during those final moments. She walked away from that conversation believing, fully believing, that Nolan intended to walk back to the boat and leave with his friends. She did not stay to watch him go. She did not follow him to the water. She had her own departure to make, on a separate boat, with a different group of people. She left the island safely that afternoon. She made it home. Nolan did not. Gracie McCormack added something else. She said, Katie has no real insight into what happened to Nolan after the two of them went their separate ways. Read that sentence slowly, because it is one of the most important things said publicly about this case so far. It means Katie walked away from that conversation with no reason to believe anything was wrong. It means whatever happened to Nolan Wells happened after Katie left. It means the last person confirmed to have spoken with him watched him, in her mind, head toward safety, and then turned and walked toward her own boat, and never thought about that afternoon again until it became national news. A short conversation on a beach, two strangers, and then one of them never made it home. What time is it where you are right now? Drop it in the comments. I am serious. I want to see it. People all over this country, all over the world, are following this case. And what you are about to hear next is the part that changes everything. Because here is the problem. Here is the crack that runs straight through the center of this investigation. Katie McCormack's family says she left believing Nolan was heading back to the boat. His friends told investigators that Nolan chose to stay behind. Those two accounts describe the same handful of minutes. They describe the same conversation, the same group of friends, the same departure, and they do not match. One of them is wrong, or one of them is incomplete, or something happened in the space between the moment Katie walked away and the moment the friends say they last saw him. Something that neither account fully captures. That gap, that narrow window of time on a beach on the 4th of July, is where this entire investigation lives. It is the space investigators are trying to fill. It is the question that has no clean answer yet. Now, before anyone turns that into something it is not, let's be precise about what we know and what we do not. Katie's family's account is not a sworn statement. It is not a formal interview with law enforcement. It is a second-hand recollection, relayed through a sister, filtered through grief and caution, and openly described as incomplete. The family has been clear about that. They are not claiming to have solved anything. They are adding a named voice, a real, identifiable person, to a contradiction that previously existed only between anonymous accounts. That is meaningful, but it is not a verdict. It is a piece of a puzzle that is still very much unfinished. What it does do is this. It raises the pressure on every other account. Because once a named individual enters the record and her version does not align with the version given by the group, investigators have to sit with both of them. They have to ask who knew what and when, and whether what people are saying now matches what they said in the days immediately after Nolan disappeared. Memory is not reliable under the best of circumstances. It is considerably less reliable when weeks have passed, when attorneys are involved, when a story is being watched by the entire country, and when the stakes of saying the wrong thing are suddenly very real. Which brings us to the attorneys. Every young man who was on that island with Nolan Wells on the 4th of July has retained legal representation. That is a fact. It is not inherently sinister. Legal counsel is a constitutional right, and in a situation this high profile and this fraught, retaining an attorney is a reasonable thing to do regardless of what a person does or does not know. But here is what it means in practical terms. According to the legal team representing Nolan's family, led by civil rights attorney Ben Crump, there has been no direct communication between the Wells family's investigators and those young men since attorneys became formally involved. Whatever those friends know about Nolan's final hours on that island, what they saw, what was said, What happened between the time Katie says she left him heading toward the boat and the time the friends say they last saw him has not reached the family directly. The attorneys have drawn a line, and nothing has crossed it. Ben Crump's involvement in this case is not incidental. His name carries weight. When he takes a case, national media follows. The story that might have stayed regional, a missing teenager in Jackson County, Mississippi, a small sheriff's office doing its best, became something the entire country was watching. That visibility has a cost and a benefit. The benefit is pressure. The cost is noise. Every piece of information that entered the public sphere was immediately processed by thousands of people online, many of them with theories, and none of them with access to the actual evidence. Sheriff John Ledbetter's early comment that no foul play was suspected drew immediate backlash. People called it premature, dismissive, a sign that the investigation was not taking the case seriously enough. The family, already carrying grief that no parent should ever have to carry, had the added fear that the people responsible for finding answers had already decided there were none to find. Then there is Ashley Cole. Early in the case, Ashley Cole, a family member with connections to the local judiciary and a personal tie to one of the young men who was with Nolan on the island, released a public statement. The statement described her son's account of the day's timeline in some detail. It addressed certain elements of what happened. It laid out a version of events from the perspective of someone close to one of the people present. Careful readers noted what it covered. Careful readers also noted what it did not cover. Questions around Nolan's phone. Gaps in the timeline that had not been publicly explained. The statement spoke to some things and remained quiet on others. And since that statement was released, Ashley Cole's public presence in this case has grown noticeably, measurably quieter. She has not issued updates. She has not commented further. The statement stands alone, and the silence around it has become its own kind of signal. Though what exactly it signals is something investigators, not the public, are best equipped to interpret. If you are not subscribed yet, right now is the moment. Hit that button and turn on notifications. This case is still active. New developments are coming, and we are going to be here for every single one of them. Now let's talk about Nolan's phone, because this piece of the investigation is one of the most significant and least discussed aspects of the case, and it deserves to be laid out clearly. After investigators examined Nolan's phone, the device was returned to his family. On its surface, that sounds like a routine step in any missing persons case. But the detail that matters is what the phone contained, or more precisely, what it no longer contained. The platform Nolan used most on the day he disappeared had automatically cleared its content. There was a window, a brief, time-limited window, during which that content existed and could have been preserved. That window closed before anyone acted to save what was inside it. And once it closed, it was gone. Think about what that means for this investigation. In a case that is built almost entirely on competing verbal accounts, what this person remembers, what that person says they saw, what someone believes happened versus what someone else insists was true, digital records represent the only form of evidence that does not rely on memory. A message sent at a specific time does not forget. A location tagged in a post does not change its story under pressure. A series of exchanges between people who were on that island that afternoon does not get coached by an attorney or reshaped by the passage of weeks. It simply exists, or it does not. In this case, it does not. The content is gone, and investigators are left working with what human beings remember, weeks after the fact, under conditions that are about as far from ideal as it is possible to get. This is not a minor setback. This is a structural problem at the center of the case. Every account that investigators are weighing, Katie's family's recollection, the friend's version of Nolan's decision to stay, the timeline of when the group actually departed, the question of who spoke to whom and what was communicated, all of it now rests entirely on what people say. And people, especially people who are under public pressure, who have attorneys advising them, who know that everything they say is being analyzed and discussed and repeated across the internet, people in that situation do not always say everything they know. They do not always say it clearly, and they do not always say it once and then stick to it. The absence of that digital record is a loss that cannot be recovered. The investigation moves forward without it. And here is where the case shifted in a meaningful direction this week. Sheriff John Ledbetter, the head of the Jackson County Sheriff's Department, the man who has been the public face of this investigation since it began, issued an update that carried a noticeably different tone from what came before. It was not the tone of a department quietly managing a local matter. It was the tone of an office that has acknowledged the scale of what it is dealing with and has taken specific, concrete steps to match it. Ledbetter confirmed that his department has begun conducting formal witness interviews. Not informal conversations, formal interviews, conducted separately, with each person questioned individually, their accounts recorded and then weighed against one another for consistency. That process matters enormously in a case like this one. When you interview people together, or when interviews happen casually and early, before anyone has had time to consider the implications of what they are saying, you often get a version of events that has been unconsciously or consciously harmonized. When you interview people separately, under formal conditions, weeks into an investigation, after the pressure has built and the contradictions have become visible, you get something closer to the truth. Not always, but closer. He also confirmed that the department is now in direct contact with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Let's be precise about what this means, because the language matters. The FBI has not taken over this case. It has not opened a separate, independent investigation. What Ledbetter described is coordination, his office reaching out to federal partners for tools and expertise that a small county department does not have internally. And there is nothing unusual about that. A sheriff's office in a county like Jackson County is resourced for what typically happens in a county like Jackson County. Traffic enforcement, property disputes, local matters. It is not staffed with digital forensics specialists who know how to recover deleted content from damaged devices. It is not equipped to coordinate interviews with witnesses who are spread across multiple states. It is not built to manage the intersection of two separate medical examinations, conducted hundreds of miles apart, a national media presence, a high-profile civil rights attorney, and an online community of hundreds of thousands of people processing every development in real time. This case, by any measure, has grown beyond what one small office was ever designed to handle alone. The FBI's involvement is not a red flag, it is a resource. And the fact that Ledbetter reached out for it suggests the investigation is being taken seriously in a way that the early "no foul play suspected" comment made people doubt. Public tips have also played a role. After the sheriff's office made a direct public appeal for information, tips began coming in that Ledbetter described as genuinely valuable. Ordinary people, not investigators, not federal agents, not attorneys, but regular people who were on the island that day, or who saw something near the water, or who remember a detail that seemed insignificant at the time and only took on meaning once the story spread. These tips, more than any press conference or federal coordination, often prove decisive in investigations like this one. A case built on competing memories can sometimes be broken open by a single person who has no reason to protect anyone and simply remembers what they saw. Now, there is one more piece of this case that has not received enough attention: the timeline of when authorities were first alerted that Nolan was missing. Multiple accounts describe a process that was disjointed, delayed, and tangled in confusion over which agency had jurisdiction over the island. Was it the county? Was it a state body? Was it a coastal authority? No one seemed to know immediately. And in that confusion, in the time it took to figure out who was supposed to respond, the window in which the response might have made a difference was narrowing. Think about what that looks like from Christine's side of it. Her son was supposed to be home. The hours were stretching. She was making calls, and the calls were landing at the wrong desks. She was being redirected. She was being told to try again, try someone else, try a different number. There is a particular kind of helplessness in that experience that lives entirely outside any official report. It is not captured in a case file. It is not reflected in the chain of custody documentation. It is a mother, in the dark, trying to find her son, and discovering that the system designed to help her did not know whose job it was to start looking. The exact length of that gap, how much time passed, where the breakdown occurred, who should have been called and when, remains disputed. Different accounts give different answers. What is not disputed is that the process did not unfold quickly or smoothly. And for a family in that situation, every minute of that confusion is not a procedural footnote. It is a minute their son was on an island somewhere and no one was moving. Both medical examinations remain pending. The official autopsy conducted by the state and the independent examination commissioned by the Wells family have not been released. There is no confirmed date for when those results will become public, and until they are, the speculation circulating online, the theories, the claims, the conclusions that are being stated as fact in comment sections and shared as though they have been verified, should be treated with serious caution. This case has already been shaped by a considerable amount of information that turned out to be incomplete, premature, or simply wrong. The responsible path is to wait for what can actually be confirmed. The investigation is moving. That is real. The FBI is formally in contact. Formal witness interviews are underway. Katie McCormack has been publicly named, and her family's account introduces a direct and named contradiction to the version of events offered by the friends who were with Nolan. These are meaningful developments, but the phone is gone. The digital trail that could have provided independent, pressure-proof evidence no longer exists. The jurisdictional confusion that delayed the initial response has not been fully explained. Ashley Cole's statement stands alone and has not been followed by anything further. The friends' attorneys have maintained a wall between their clients and the Wells family's investigators. And the two medical examinations, the documents that may ultimately tell us the most about what happened to Nolan, are still sealed. Christine Wansley is still speaking. She is still sitting through interviews. She is still learning the language of an active investigation: toxicology, jurisdiction, chain of custody, independent examination. She is still fighting for transparency in the way that only a parent who has no other option fights. And underneath all of it, underneath every press conference and every legal term and every development that gets reported and analyzed and discussed, she is still carrying the memory of July the 3rd, a family dinner, her son getting ready for a holiday weekend, the ordinary, unceremonious way he told her he loved her before he walked out the door. There was nothing significant about that moment, nothing that felt like a goodbye, nothing that felt like the last ordinary evening of a life that had barely started. It was just a Tuesday in the way that Tuesdays always are, until suddenly they are not. Nolan Wells was 18 years old. He got on a boat on the 4th of July. He had a short conversation on a beach with a young woman named Katie McCormack who left believing he was heading home. His friends say he chose to stay. The FBI is now involved. The witnesses are being formally interviewed, separately, under conditions designed to surface the truth. And somewhere in the gap between the moment Katie walked away and the moment that boat left the island without him, the answer to this case is still waiting to be found. We are not going anywhere. If this case matters to you, and clearly it does, because you are still here, subscribe right now and hit the bell so you do not miss the next update. New developments in this investigation are coming, and when they drop, we will break them down exactly the way we did today. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Do you believe Katie McCormack's account? Do you think the friend's version holds up against it? Do you think the FBI's involvement changes where this investigation goes? Be respectful. Be honest. I read every single comment that comes through on this channel, and your perspective matters. The family of Nolan Wells deserves people who are paying attention, and you clearly are. I will see you in the next one.